Good afternoon. I'm Mike Spear with Genome Alberta, and I am at the Bioindustry Organization's annual convention this year in Boston. And you can follow us as at Mike's Gene, or you can follow the bio group as at I Am Biotech on Twitter. And joining me this afternoon is Breanne Everett. She's with Orpyx Medical Devices, and they have a very interesting device here for diabetics. So Breanne, the first thing I'll ask you is, what is the problem that you need to solve for diabetics?
Sure. So we're addressing a problem called peripheral neuropathy that affects about half of diabetic patients. Over the course of their disease, diabetics end up actually losing the sensation in their feet, and that can happen to varying degrees. When people really lose a lot of sensation, they're at risk for developing complications such as ulcers, just from putting too much pressure over time on specific points of their foot without having a normal pain feedback loop. So what we're doing is we're trying to reestablish that sensory loop that's otherwise not there in these patients.
Now you've brought a sample, the prototype of the device you've developed, which is essentially something that goes inside their shoe, I suppose. So kind of show us and explain what it does.
Sure. So this is a prototype of the initial device that we're developing. This is a trial device that we're using for testing purposes. What it is it's a custom orthotic insole built for a diabetic patient. And inside the insole, there's an array of sensors, so sensors at key locations that tend to be problem areas in the diabetic foot. Those sensors take in pressure information from the bottom of the foot, and then that information is sent to a node that's clipped to the top of the shoe. That node analyzes that data and wirelessly sends feedback to a wristwatch that the patient wears. So what happens is the patient would receive alerts when he or she is causing damage to their foot and should actually modify their behavior. They'd be able to look at that wristwatch face, and the wristwatch face would then direct them as to what to do to help alleviate the pressure that they're seeing on part of their foot and prevent complications like amputation ultimately down the road.
Give me an example of the kind of behavior or what you're trying to encourage them to do. Is it to walk more? Is it to the way they plant their foot? Like give me an idea of what they would do. They look at their wristwatch, say, "Oh, I have to do something." Give me an example.
So what the patient would have to do would really vary directly with what the activity they were doing that caused them to get into trouble in the first place. It could be that they are actually just standing in the grocery store line, putting too much pressure on their left heel, unaware of it, not readjusting pressure like somebody with a normal pain feedback loop would do. Another possibility would be that they're sitting at their desk and they're just setting their feet still and putting too much pressure over time. It tends to be more static conditions like that, standing, sitting, resting your foot on something, where you actually get into trouble. There are possibilities of getting into trouble with walking or running, for example, where your biomechanics of your gait are a little bit off, and so you tend to continually put pressure. So the modified behavior would be in direct relation to what the activity you're doing. So if you're putting too much pressure statically, you probably have to lift your foot up, take pressure off, possibly adjust your footwear. If you're walking or running, it may be that you need actually a different insole to help with how your foot biomechanics are changed. Or it could be that you could have a rock in your shoe that's causing the problem that you just don't feel. So there are a lot of different things that could cause the problem, and behavioral modification would vary in relation to that.
Now your company is also working on another device that you told me about earlier that I think is even cooler than the insole. It's something that goes on their back and provides some sort of input on their back. Explain that to me.
So the root of the problem with peripheral neuropathy is that there's no sensory feedback getting to the brain, so that connection between the brain and the feet is interrupted. So what we're doing with our second device, which is called the Surrogate Rx, is we're taking pressure information from the bottom of the foot, but instead of just relaying it in an alert form or an image form on a watch, we're actually sending that to a tactile pad that's worn on the back, so the patient feels in real time sensory feedback on their back from their feet. So you retrain yourself to feel your feet through your back.
That just must be the weirdest experience. You haven't had a chance to try it yourself, have you?
Well, we have been trying the sensors and stimulators independently, but right now we're putting the full device together, so it'll be by the end of this year that we have the functioning one-to-one feedback system developed, and we're looking forward to that. I'll be using it quite a bit.
Where does the development cycle stand for this right now? I know you've got a prototype, but when do you expect to see something hit the market?
For the initial device, we're just getting everything ready for manufacturing right now, and we'll have the device likely ready for the end of this year to be commercially available. For that second device, like I said, the prototype will be ready by the end of this year, and then once our trials and testing are complete, we expect to have the device on the market by 2014.
Now, is this going to be classified as a medical device? Will you have to go through an approval process?
So for this initial device, it can be sold as either a consumer electronic device or a Class 1 medical device. We're going through the regulatory process right now to get it classed as a Class 1 device. And then for that second device, because you're actually transmitting energy to the back in that feedback loop, it's classed as a Class 2 device, and that's why we actually have to complete a whole series of trials before we get that out.
Now, as usual, folks come down to Bio to look for partnering opportunities and to talk to people. Who have you been talking with, and what are you doing down here this year?
Our major goals in coming to the conference is really to network with some of the larger medical device companies, and that's been going really well. So hopefully we'll be seeing some strategic partnerships that develop out of this.
Good. Thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Mike.